Good day everyone, I am Raiza Lirico, the presenter for this discussion, together with Daisy Mijano, Hazel Judlimpag, Javelin Monterde, Nabilin Tijas, and Rochelle Limbing, with the topic, the input hypothesis and their theories of second language acquisition. So let's have first the objectives. At the end of this lesson, students should be able to know and understand what is the input hypothesis, determine the relevance of the input hypothesis in second language acquisition. So the input hypothesis is a hypothesis in second language acquisition developed by Stephen Krashen. So Stephen Krashen, born in May 14, 1941, an American linguist, educational researcher, and activist, emeritus professor of education at the University of Southern California. So the input hypothesis is Krashen's attempt to explain how the learner acquires a second language, how second language acquisition takes place. So the input hypothesis is more on explanation of Krashen of how learner acquires a second language, or how learner obtain the second language, and also how second language happen. The input hypothesis is only concerned with acquisition, not learning. So what is the difference between these two? First of all, acquisition is subconscious. This means a learner is not aware that he or she already knows the certain language. On the other hand, learning is conscious. This implies that a learner is aware about the language that he or she is acquiring. So in what instance that the learner is not aware that he or she already knows the certain language? Specifically, in second language acquisition. So a good example of acquisition is when we watch K-drama more often. If you notice, the word anyong sayo, kansamnida, saranghe, and other Korean words is not anymore unknown to us because we acquired it through regular exposure in watching K-drama. Because of our interest that we like watching K-drama, to the point that we don't realize that we already have acquired the language by constantly watching or following K-dramas. Like even the culture, the food, the hairstyle, and even the clothing is also acquired by the others. But we are not going to talk about that. Let's just focus on the language. So take note that acquisition, language is acquired by simple and regular exposure. While learning, it is a result of direct instruction in the rules of language. So to continue the discussion, let's have Daisy Mijano to further explain what is the input hypothesis in second language acquisition.
Good day everyone, I am Daisy Mijano, and now I am going to discuss the input hypothesis. So according to this hypothesis, the learner improves and progresses along the natural order when he or she receives the second language input that is one step beyond his or her current stage of linguistic competence. So in other words, an input hypothesis is every step daw nimo sa eskwelahan is naa kay matun-an na madungagan ng imong matun-an, manuwagan ng imong knowledge pag naay mo tudlo sa imuha. Since not all of the learners can be at the same level of linguistic competence at the same time, Krashen suggests that natural communicative input is the key to designing a syllabus, ensuring in this way that each learner will receive some I+1. So the input hypothesis has a formula that I+1. I stands for student current knowledge and +1 is the comprehensible input. So I stands for student current knowledge. So kato pang imong prior knowledge. Kadtong natun-an lang jud nimo, then ang +1 kay katong comprehensible input or katong gitudlo sa imuha sa maestra.
Good day everyone. So let's proceed to the statement of hypothesis. A hypothesis is a statement that can be tested by the scientific research. If you want to test a relationship between two or more variables, you need to write the hypothesis before you start the experiment or the data collection. The input hypothesis relates to acquisition to learning. We acquire by understanding language that contains structures and deep beyond our current level of competence. When communication is successful, when the output is understood and there is enough of it, I+1 will provided automatically. Production ability merge, and it is not taught directly. Thank you, and let's proceed to the next reporter.
Good day everyone, I am Roch Iskabusilimbing and I am going to discuss about the evidences supporting the hypothesis. First, language acquisition in children. It ensures that I+1 is covered with no guesswork as to just I+1 for each child. On the other hand, deliberate aim at I+1 might
So, good day. My name is Nabil Tihas and let's proceed to evidence from second language acquisition. The silent period and L1 influence. The explanation of the silent period in terms of the input hypothesis is straightforward. The child is building up competence in the second language via listening, by understanding the language around him. In accordance with the input hypothesis, speaking ability emerges on its own after enough competence has been developed by listening and understanding. So, first language acquisition is something like Momo or Gugu. So, while the child is growing, they are learning their language through their environment. So, in that way, they apply their second language acquisition. So, the deaf or the children who can talk is excluded in the second language acquisition because they can't hear or they can't even talk. So, let's proceed to the advantages of L1 role use. So, the use of L1 role allows the performer to outperform his competence to meet a practical need in L2 communication before he has acquired the relevant rule I+1. The early production allowed by the use of L1 roles also helps to invite input. So, the use of the first language acquisition completely helped the children in acquiring the second language acquisition, as it provides background and resource through the use of step-by-step I+1. So, the use of first language acquisition is also help in acquiring inputs. So, applied linguistic research. So, number 1 is deductive methods. Rules first, then practice. Grammar, translation, and cognitive code are slightly more efficient than audio lingual for adults. So, the deductive method on the process of learning the rules of a language before practicing it is most applicable than the use of audiolingual adults. So, number 2 is for adolescents. There is no measurable difference. That's all. And thank you.
So, let's proceed to the input hypothesis diagram. So, this is the simplified explanation of input hypothesis. Input message containing no structures beyond current competence. I plus 0. I is the present level or the current level of the understanding of the students or a person. So there is no acquisition language takes place. Therefore, student will not learn any new vocabulary in their language since they are being challenged with new vocabulary. So it is a no. Then, input message slightly above current ability level or the formula is the I plus 1. I plus 1 is the comprehensible input that we discussed a while ago. So, therefore, acquisition of language takes place. Student will gain more vocabulary and competence in the language since they are being taught slightly above their current ability. So, it is a yes. Input message too far beyond person's competence, I plus 10. So, acquisition of language will not take place. Student will not gain any competence and therefore what they are learning sounds like incomprehensible noise. So it is no. Acquisition of language takes place. Of course, if an elementary student or average students will be taught the lessons for a college students, so of course they will not learn anything from it. That is not his or her level of understanding. So the bottom of this is, according to hypothesis, we move from one stage of understanding to another. More specifically, we acquire new rule by understanding messages that contain this new rule. We move from stage I to the present level or the current level of understanding or of the understood message or current competence to the next level, giving the formula I plus 1 from that on. From that on is the comprehensible input. So that's all.